good morning and good afternoon or good evening from wherever you are logging into. I know for some of you, maybe around the globe, it's pretty early in the morning, so we appreciate you joining us today. We're going to go ahead and get started so that we can move along with all the topics we want to cover. There's quite a lot to cover. You should know that there will be a recording of this webinar after posted on our social media. So do please share that with your friends and family or anyone that's interested. But again, we thank you for joining us. My name is Roxy Moser. I'll be your host today. I am the Director of Immigration Services for VIMA Staffing Partners and Valley Medical Staffing. If you have any questions, we will address those towards the end of this webinar. You can enter your questions in the tab marked Q&A at the top or side of your screen, or bottom actually. To get started, wanted to just touch base on who we are. Valley Medical Staffing was founded in 2003 and VIMA Staffing Partners came along there shortly thereafter. We sponsor EB3 work or employment-based visas for acute care hospitals across the US with a start in California, also in states like Minnesota and of course across the US. We're really proud of what we do. We help nurses like yourselves either come from abroad or stay in country after being educated here in the US. We find you acute care roles in some of the best hospitals in the country and help you get your visas for permanent residency. A couple things of note that we're really also proud of is, of course, being certified by the Alliance for Ethical International Recruitment Practices, which is governed by the CGFNS, which of course, most of you are aware of what the CGFNS also does for your visa process. And we are also Gold Seal approved by the Joint Commission, which is to denote a level of standard with the hospitals and the patient care that our nurses provide. I want to introduce our speakers and speakers, if you don't mind, just say a quick hello and give us a sentence on what made you get into this business or what about it is your favorite thing. To start, we have CEO and Managing Partner, Michael Conley, in the really fun shirt today of Valley Medical Staffing and VIMA Staffing Partners. Hi, Mike.
Thanks, Roxy. Good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone. I'm so happy that you could join us today. The one thing I love about my job is I get to make dreams come true. So it's a bit of a Santa Claus job.
Great, great. Thanks for coming today, Mike. Next, we have attorney Michael Hammond with Corporate Immigration Partners. Just a note, Mike has been working with VIMA and Valley since 2003, a great partnership as lead attorney. Mike Hammond, give us a little hello and you love Roxy. The immigration business.
Yeah, thanks for having us on this call. We appreciate it. We've certainly valued our partnership with Valley and VIMA for a really long time. The thing I like best about this practice is interacting with a lot of individuals who are looking to make a difference in other people's lives, whether it's you're looking to come to the US and do something for your family or looking to provide excellent patient care. So we're excited to help you out today and conduct this.
Excellent. Thanks for joining us, Mike. And last but not least at all is someone that so many of you who are already nurses working with us may be familiar with the name and hopefully now the face. This is paralegal and case manager Sarah Sheets from Corporate Immigration Partners. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, I've been working with VIMA and Valley since 2019. And one of my favorite things is just getting to know the different nurses and their backgrounds and helping them and their families get to the US.
Great. Thank you, guys. At the bottom of the screen, you'll see vimastaffingpartners.com. That is our website where if at the end of this call you want more information or would like to apply, you certainly can visit. We also have an email, careers@vmstaffing.com. Again, these slides will be posted online and you'll certainly be able to find all that information later. But just for your information on how to contact us, And then once again, if you have questions today, we'll address those at the end of the webinar. Do go ahead and enter them in the Q&A section of Zoom. Okay, let's get started. I'm going to hand it off to Mike Hammond, and he's going to talk about what retrogression is and how to read the Visa Bulletin.
Okay, thanks, Roxy. So let's start talking about retrogression by trying to define it a little bit. And I think the easiest way to think of as retrogression is just how long it's going to take for you once you start your journey and your legal process to come to the U.S. until you can actually come to the U.S. So in other words, it's just a line. It's how long you're in the line. It's not a concept that is new. It's been around forever. It is certainly a more current concept because of some changes that happened about a year ago, which we'll talk about in a minute. But nonetheless, it is simply how long it's going to take you to get from I file my case, when can I go to my interview, and then ultimately come in the U.S. Retrogression in the line is created because of a simple concept of supply and demand. As most of you know, the demand for RNs in the U.S. is huge. It's not just RNs, it's a lot of skilled labor in the U.S., whether it's IT professionals or engineers or doctors. There's a lot of demand in the U.S., and the supply is rather limited. So there is a restriction put on the number of employment-based visas. And in this context, visa just means green card, employment-based green cards. There's 140,000 minimum allocated each year. And that does not mean 140,000 workers. It's 140,000 visas. So if you're an RN and you've got a spouse and 2 kids, you count as 4 visas from that 140,000. So since we have more than 140,000 that want to come in each year, a line forms. And that line is simply referred to as retrogression. Now, that 140,000 is split by countries and categories. Roxy, if you can flip to the next slide.
Technical difficulties, one moment.
That's okay.
There we go.
There we go. Okay, the 140,000 is split by countries and by categories. So RNs are in what's called the 3rd category. People use the phrase all the time, EB3. EB simply stands for employment-based. So EB3 is employment-based 3rd. As you notice, there are 4. There's actually a 5th category, and those are split up. You also notice that there are some countries that have their own queue, their own line. China, India, Mexico, the Philippines are in the queue right now. If you are not born in one of those 4 countries, then you go in the other column. And people refer to that other column as ROW, which stands for rest of the world, or just all others. So if you were born in Kenya, you're going to fall under that first column. If you were born in the Philippines, you're going to fall under that last column. And that's how the 140,000 are allocated. The reason why there's certain countries split out is because there's a limit of 7% for each particular country. So out of our 140,000, the most that can come in is 7%. Now, one little point, there's not really 140,000, it's more than that. For this fiscal year, for example, it was 161,000 that we had for this year. So don't take the math and go 140,000 times 7%, that's how many I can get for the Philippines. It doesn't always work like that. A couple other things to keep in mind, and we're going to talk about the Visa Bulletin, is the allocation, the 140,000 we're talking about, is done on a fiscal year basis. The U.S. government runs from October 1st to September 30th. So every October 1st, we get a new batch of 140,000. So here in about 8 weeks, we're going to get a new 140,000. How we track these numbers is through a publication called the Visa Bulletin. The Visa Bulletin is published by the Department of State, the same people that kind of run the U.S. consulates. They issue the Visa Bulletin in the month before the Visa Bulletin it takes effect. So for example, the one we're looking at now is the August Visa Bulletin. It came out about 2 weeks ago, or about a week and a half ago. So generally speaking, middle of the month before, we get the next bulletin. So the bulletin we're always really keen to see is the October bulletin, which comes out in September. You can see the Visa Bulletin on the Department of State's website. You can subscribe to it. It's free. They'll email you a copy of it every month when it comes out. You'll get it at the same time everybody else gets it. There's no advance copies. One other thing to keep in mind, and we'll talk a little bit more about the Visa Bulletin, is that 140,000, the U.S. government system uses a use it or lose it kind of program. So the 140,000 that we have, okay, is given on October 1st. If by September 30th of the next year, we've not used all 140,000, let's say they only issued 130,000, then those 10,000 that are left over do not carry over. They're simply wasted, okay? So we want to, as much as possible, use the Visa Bulletin. Now, you'll notice on this particular screen we're looking at, there's something called final action dates right at the top. There's 2 charts that come out each month. Final action date chart is one, date for filing chart's a second. We'll look at that just in a second. But let's look at what final action date chart means. Is if you're overseas, this is the most important chart for you, because this is the chart that says when you get a priority date that is earlier than the date on this column, you can have your interview at the U.S. consulate and then be approved. If you're in the U.S. and you have a 485 pending, that the final action date, and you have a priority date before that date. So for example, if you were from the Philippines and you had a date of November 2021, your 485 could be adjudicated and approved. Now, there's a second chart. Let's flip to the second one, Roxy.
There seems to be a quick lag or slow.
Okay, there's the date for filing chart. The date for filing chart is very important for individuals in the U.S. physically. Those of you who typically are here on, say, an F1 visa, or you are here in some other work capacity, or you're a dependent or TPS or whatever the case may be, the date for filing chart is more important for you because this is the chart that says when you can file your I-485. So the date for filing chart is almost always ahead of the final action date chart, okay? Now, let's flip to the next screen. Let's talk about how we get a priority date. And again, a priority date is just an immigration term that means your spot in the line. You get your priority date the day your I-140 is filed and received. So if I file your case today, July 24th or whatever today is, and it's received tomorrow, July 25th, July 25th becomes your priority date. And your priority date, again, is your spot in the queue. And again, it's based upon filing. Now, people ask all the time, hey, I've heard there's premium processing for an I-140. And the answer is, yes, there is. However, the premium processing does not make you move any faster in the priority date line. It has nothing to do with how quickly your I-140 is approved. It also doesn't give you an earlier priority date. So whenever the normal processing is faster than the priority date queue in the retrogression line, premium processing provides no advantage, okay? So right now, most companies are not doing premium processing. There's zero value in doing it. It's simply a waste of money. One caveat to that is priority dates can be what we use the term recapture. So let's say that you had a hospital 3 years ago that filed for you, and then for some reason they decided not to pursue your case, or you decided not to join them, or whatever the case, and you had an I-140 that was approved through that prior hospital, okay? And that I-140 was approved and was not deemed to be fraudulent or approved under misrepresentation, then that priority date can be retained. And when VEMA files a new I-140 for you, we can provide a copy of your old I-140 and you will get the old priority date. So you get your spot in line, you never lose your spot in line. So that can be a huge advantage. Priority dates are not transferable for family cases. Many of you might have a family-based case. Your brother who's in the US sponsored you, and that queue is like 174 years long, but he did it anyway, just in case. Or your mom sponsored you or something like that. Those priority dates do not carry over to employment-based cases, but employment-based cases do carry over to another employment-based case. Now, one other comment about priority dates that I think is really important, and it ties into the visa bulletin, is the country you are charged under or counted under is based upon your country of birth, not your country of citizenship. So if you were born in India and immigrated to Canada and became a Canadian citizen, you may be eligible for a TN visa to come and work in the US as an RN, but you're still going to go under the queue for India, okay? There's another concept called cross-chargeability. So let's say what that means is that you can take the country of birth of either yourself or your spouse, whichever is advantageous to you. So if you were, back to my example of someone from India, if you were born in India and you happen to have been working in Ireland as a nurse and got married there because you just fell in love with that Irish accent and maybe the beer drinking and you fell in love, you can use the priority date for your spouse who was from Ireland. And if you're single right now and from India, maybe transferring to Ireland and trying to get married is probably a really good strategic plan. But that's the cross-chargeability thing. And again, country of birth, not country of citizenship. Okay, let's move to the next slide. How long will it take? So people, that's the question, right? We all want to know, how long is retrogression? And the real answer is, we don't know. It changes. You asked me 3 months ago, I'd have given you one answer. You asked me today, I'm going to give you another answer. 3 months from now, I'm going to tell you something else. We're certainly going to know more when the October bulletin comes out, because we'll have an idea as to how far the dates move. But let's actually look at a couple of things and keep in mind. First of all, just to answer the question, because I know Roxy said, if I don't answer this question, she's going to zap me or something, maybe black out my screen or something. But I think it's going to take, if I were guessing today, about 2.5 years. If I'm optimistic, maybe a little less. If I'm being pessimistic, maybe a little longer, but somewhere in that neighborhood. So now let's look and see what happened this year. Keep in mind, this year for us started last October and is ending here in a few weeks. So last October, our date our date for filing was February 2023, and it didn't move, and I'll talk about in a second as to why it never moved. Our final action date started at October of 2023. We moved all the way to, we got as far as November 22nd, 2022, before the dates retrogressed again. So we moved almost a year forward. Now, when they set the date for filing chart, they set it, and they set it far in advance. And then the Department of State predicts how many cases they will get through during the course of the year. So in theory, by the end of the fiscal year, the date for final action date will match the date for filing chart. Now, if you notice this year, it never matched. We were short by about 8 weeks. Our final date for filing, February 1st, 2023. Closest we got was end of November 2022. So we're a little short on that. But generally, that's a good predictor. So when I look at the October bulletin and I see date for filing, I can assume that the Department of State thinks they can get up to that by the end of the fiscal year. Now, people at this point in time, whenever I talk about retrogression, always want to know, why was there no retrogression a couple years ago? My friend did this in 2021 and they didn't have to wait in line. Why did retrogression happen? Was something happen that was new? Was there a change in the law or anything like that? And the answer is there was not a change in the law. What happened, most of you probably remember this, we had that thing called COVID. Remember that? Yeah. So it's a very negative thing for all of us, particularly the people who got sick, particularly the people who didn't make it. Very negative. But for immigration, COVID was wonderful. And the reason why is there's an old rule from the 70s that had never, ever been enacted before, but it happened because of COVID. And the rule said any unused family-based cases in a given fiscal year that were unused carried over into the employment-based side. Well, what happened when COVID hit? All of the US consulates shut down. So they could not issue any family-based visas. In addition, nobody was traveling. So even if you'd already had a visa issued or wanted to have a visa issued, you couldn't go to the consulate because they weren't open, they weren't issuing, and you weren't traveling. So as a result, all of these large numbers of unused family cases got dumped on the employment side. And to give you some idea as to how much got dumped, for fiscal year 2021, instead of 140,000, we had 262,000. For 2022, instead of 140,000, we had 281,000. For last year, fiscal year 2023, we had 197,000. So we had huge extra influxes of cases because of COVID. Now that COVID's over, I'm using asterisks to say it's over, the consulates are back open, family-based cases are being reprocessed again like normal, and there's never an overflow because that family categories have an even longer line than employment-based side. So the idea of, will this be over soon? Will we go back to what we had? The answer is absolutely not, okay? We're not going to go back to that, okay? So this is our real world that we have that we're kind of living with right now. Okay, next topic is what's going to happen in 2025. So crystal ball looking for you. So, you know, the real answer is I have no idea. October Bulletin could come out and surprise all of us. And, people want an answer and I'm happy to give one. And I'm happy to be wrong in September. And you guys can all email Roxy. Don't email me, email Roxy and go, that Mike guy you had on, he was wrong. And that's okay. As long as you only email Roxy or maybe Sarah, then I'm good. So I'm going to predict that the final action date chart is going to move from November 2022 to sometime in January. That's my prediction. Couple of months, not huge, but a few months, okay? I'm going to predict, and that was, I think, easier to predict because they tend to spread those out a little bit. So I'm not as likely to be wrong, way off on that one. On the date for filing chart, that's a lot harder. Date for filing charts tend to deal more with who's in the US, 485 processing, and the inventory is not as large. So we might get 6 months, 8 months. I don't think it's going to be a year, though. So for those of you who are hoping it's going to go all the way to sometime in 2024, I don't think that's the case. I'd love to be wrong, but I don't think that is the case. So that's my prediction. And again, we'll all look forward in September to see. We should have planned this. We did not. We should have planned to make everybody give a guess so that Roxy could even get more emails about people that are wrong. Next topic, next slide. As a result of retrogression, there's all kinds of other considerations that are really important that we have to think about and kind of keep in mind. So I kind of wanted to go through a couple things specifically. First of all, age out with kids. So kids, you've got kids and you want to bring them to the US, or at least most days you want to bring them to the US with you. Probably some days where you're like, yeah, I kind of hope you have to stay here. But the idea is they need a green card by the time they're 21. Okay, so and retrogression does not save them. Now, here's the way the USCIS calculates a person's birthday. So you and I calculate their age of 21 on their birthday. The USCIS takes their 21st birthday and they add on to it ever how many days their I-140 was pending. So if your I-140 was pending for 10 months, your child's not going to turn 21 on their 21st birthday in the eyes of the USCIS. They're going to turn 21 plus 10 months, okay? If you're entering this process with a child that is 16, 17, 18, 19, please make sure that your account manager is Roxy or whoever you're working with is aware that you've got a child who's 16, 17, 18 or whatever, so that we can make as many accommodations as we can for that particular child. So that's one thing, is age out. Couple other miscellaneous things is a visa screen is needed for the immigration process. If you're in the US, it's needed at the 485 stage. If you're overseas, it's needed for the interview. They do have an expiration. They're good for 5 years. That's it. They expire. They have a date on them. So you need it at the time of your interview. So if you've had one from a few years ago, you need to make sure you pay attention to the date it expires. It needs to be kept valid, not only for your interview, it has to be valid on the day you enter. So if you, that's the day you officially get your green card. So if you have a, let's just make up a hypo, let's say you have a visa screen that expires in February of 2025, you're getting an interview in January and you're like, oh, I'm fine, it's all good. What if you don't travel till March? You're going to be out. So renew that visa screen, keep that timely done. One of the things people ask me all the time is, with retrogression, what should I focus on? And I tell people all the time, I say this, focus on the things you can control, the things you need to do. You're going to get here to the US. It's just going to take longer than it did 3 years ago. So focus on those things like passing your English exams if you haven't done that yet, getting your visa screen done, making sure if the hospital you're going to work at wants bedside care that you're actually in one of those positions. Make sure that you provide the documents that are needed for the National Visa Center so that we can get you DQ'd as quickly as possible. All the things that are on your plate, do. Don't think of it as, well, I might not, need this for a year. Get that English done, get that visa screen issued, and then you're going to be fine. Overseas assignments. It's an important question. You're sitting, let's say you're in the Philippines right now, and you're looking at an assignment in Dubai, and they want a 1-year commitment, and you just now got your case filed. Talk to your account manager to make sure everybody's on the same page. But in my opinion, taking a 1-year assignment overseas is great. Retrogression isn't going to get fixed within 1 year. You're not going to hurt your case. And there's no reason to choose the consulate in Dubai, because you're going to be, that year's going to be up and you're going to be back in the Philippines by the time you do your interview anyway. So overseas assignments are something that you certainly want to consider as well. Now let's flip for a second and talk about individuals and other considerations you have to think about if you're here in the US. And let's walk through the most common scenario I see all the time are RNs who've graduated from a US school. So they have a US degree, BSN, and they're getting hired by VEMA. And let's say you just graduate in May, you're going to get a 1-year OPT EAD card. Now, unfortunately, the Department of Labor has not deemed a nursing program to be a STEM occupation. Those of you who don't know what STEM means, it refers to science, technology, engineering, and math. Personally, I would have thought nursing would have been under science, because it certainly seemed like something I would not be able to do. So that sounds like science, or it could be math even for me as well. But the USCIS and DOL have not designated nursing, which means you're limited to the 1-year OPT. That's it. There's not a 2-year STEM extension available for you. So you come out of school, you get this 1-year OPT, you can now work for Valley or VEMA for a year. And you know, because I just told you, retrogression is longer than a year. And even though the date for filing chart is faster than the 2.5 years I predicted, might only be a year and a half is still more than 1 year. So what's going to happen? You're going to have a gap. Now, a couple things to consider during that gap. Number one is you have to think about your status, because today you're in the U.S. and you're legal. You came into the U.S. as an F1, you entered properly, you went to school like you're supposed to, you graduated, you got your OPT EAD, you're working properly on it. You're in status. We want to help you maintain status, so you want to stay legal. Second thing you probably want is you probably want to be able to keep working, okay? So there is a way to do both keeping you in status and keep you working. So let me turn it over to my cohort, who, by the way, I don't know if you guys have noticed, Michael and I go to the exact same barber. We even go the same time. They do both of us. It's like a buy one, get one free. It's a great deal. So, but Michael and his company have developed a great program to deal with the gap on an OPT. So, Mr. Conley there, sir.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah, we get a deal when we get our hair cut because they're only cutting a couple hairs. So it's great that way. Yeah, the nice thing about the immigration system for people who've graduated in the United States is they do have the OPT, so they can start working right away. I'm with Mike. I wish that they would recognize nurses as part of STEM, but they haven't. So at the end of 1 year, in order to stay in status and be able to continue working, we've partnered with a couple different schools that provide what's called curriculum practical training. And we provide, the documentation that's required by the school, and the job site where you're going to be working has, agreed to go along with this and provide the documentation that's required as well. So you can be in school getting a Master's of Science in Nursing, stay in status, keep working full time while you wait out the USCIS. Because what we're really ultimately hoping for is for the opportunity for you to file your I-485. Because at the same time we filed I-485, we also filed the I-765, which is a request for a work permit. Once you get that work permit that's associated with that I-485, you don't have to worry about going to school. You don't have to worry about anything. You just have to worry about keeping it current until your green card's issued. So there's ways to stay in status, keep working, and wait out the USCIS by going to school and getting a degree that a lot of you are already looking to get, which is a Master's of Science in Nursing.
Okay, thank you. One other consideration to talk about here is the idea of, is there going to be legislation? Are we going to get some relief? There's a Healthcare Worker Resiliency Act that's been introduced a couple times. The idea is to create an exception or a carve out for registered nurses, doctors, and possibly some other healthcare occupations. We have been working hard to get that passed. One of my partners, Sherry Neal, was in DC, today's Thursday, yesterday, with a few hospitals and clients, lobbying a couple senators on that particular legislation. In the U.S. system, I'm not sure how many of you pay attention to U.S. politics, but the best description of it right now would be dumpster fire, maybe, if that rings a bell for anyone. But the idea of getting a standalone immigration bill passed in this Congress, or frankly in any Congress recently, is zero. Okay, it's not going to happen. However, there is something in the U.S. called the lame duck session, and that occurs after the elections, which for the U.S. is in November, until the current Congress ends, which is sometime in December. During that time, they often have certain bills, usually budget bills, that are what are called must-pass legislation. And often during that time, we can get certain bills tagged onto or added to those budget bills. And that's our best hope of getting something like this passed. Now, last year, we got the act added to a budget bill, actually to the border security bill at the end of the year, got it through the Senate. It was not highly publicized, which is intentional. And we believe it was slated to pass the House until President Trump decided that he didn't want the border security bill to go forward. He wanted it to go forward under his administration, which from his perspective would be maybe next year. So the bill died, but we were very close. We had the champagne already bought. It just wasn't chilled yet, but we were very excited. And that's probably the closest we've been in about 4 or 5 years. So there is hope out there, and we'll keep people updated. If something like that passes, it'll obviously be big news. Acting on it behind the scenes is the approach that we're all taking right now. There is also some administrative policies that are being considered by the current administration that would change when 485s could be filed. And that, if something like that happens, that could potentially change the date for filing chart and provide some relief there. So Valley and VEMA and their customers are very active in trying to get legislation passed. So we are working on that, but there is nothing imminent. Okay, last
Mike, we've actually we've had success in the past on these recapture bills. But it's been years and years and years, and the political situation in the United States has become so fraught that there doesn't seem to be a lot of effort to get anything done, quite frankly. But it has happened.
It has happened. The last time it happened, Mike and I were there on the front lines. We both had big afros. Sarah and Roxy had not been born yet. But we actually had, they called it a Schedule X, and we had a carve out of, I believe 30,000 RNs only, RNs and PTs, that lasted us in maybe 2003, 4, 5, 6, something like that, for about 3 years. So there definitely is a historical precedent for this. So we'll hope it happens. Okay, the last little topic before we go into Q&A.
Mike, I'm gonna stop you really fast and
sorry.
just make one more comment on the other considerations. You had touched base also, Mike Conley, on this with respect to those who are doing an adjustment of status as a F1 visa holder and perhaps returning to school for your MSN. There are other master's programs which would also enable you to be able to work full time, including things like EMBAs and healthcare. And should anyone ever have questions about those things, you're more than welcome to reach out to us. And then our team will also help any of those students through that process. We want to make sure that we help you stay within visa status. And before we move to the H-1B, which is really one of the most common questions that will start the Q&A, I just want to remind people to enter any other questions you have in the Q&A section of the Zoom. And lastly, Mike, Sarah, any comments on other considerations or anything that Mike Hammond has discussed before we move to Q&As? Okay. All
I
right.
think you covered most of it.
Great. All right, let's talk about H-1B. You know, the most common question that I've been receiving, and I know so many of us are, is whether or not an EB-3 visa could be, say, converted to an H-1B, or if we could file for an H-1B, or if you can have one filed for you concurrently. So maybe Mike Hammond, you can start us off, and then Mike Conley, you can let us know also your take on why this is not necessarily a possibility today for us.
Okay, so first of all, the easy part of this is that there is absolutely no conflict between an EB-3 immigrant petition and I-140 and an H-1B. So for people who have an I-140 filed and there's an H-1B available, eligible, there's nothing wrong with doing both of them, okay? Totally fine. Now, here's the problem. And first of all, the reason why people want H-1Bs, you're an RN, you're sitting there going, I don't want to wait in line, retrogression's taking forever, and I heard about this H-1B, and it's for people with bachelor's degrees, and I have a BSN, so surely I qualify. The reason why the vast majority of nurses, maybe 98%, maybe 99%, maybe 99.5%, don't qualify for an H-1B is that in addition to you having a BSN, that must be proven that the job requires a BSN. And in the US, there are no states where you need a BSN to get a license. Every state, an associate's is sufficient. So in order for you to be filed for a BSN, the hospital that you're going to be ultimately working at has to document that everybody they employ in that, I don't know, ICU unit, med surg unit, whatever it happens to be, has a BSN, and that's what they're hired on. And the reality is there are very few hospitals in the US where that is the standard. There's a few units, there's a few hospitals, but not many. And so for most people, an H-1B is not an option. The other thing to keep in mind is that there are some people where an H-1B would not be desired anyway. Because keep in mind your spouse, if you're married and you have a spouse that comes in on H-4, they can't work. So they would be here for at least a year and a half, possibly longer, without the ability to work. So it's not a great option. It's always fine to explore these different things. Options aside from waiting in the EB3 line are primarily available to individuals who are citizens of Canada, citizens of Mexico, because you can come in on a TN. Aside from that, the EB3 line is the route to go.
And I'm going to piggyback on that. We've tried to work with several clients to develop H-1B programs with them. And from our largest client to our smallest client, it's impossible for them to change job descriptions. A lot of them have union considerations as well, which prevent changes to job descriptions. And like Mike says, there's so many associate degree nurses in the United States, just about every unit is going to have associate degree nurses in it. So it's darn near impossible for hospitals to prove that an H-1B is required to work in those units. And it is what it is, but until the requirement in the United States for nurses becomes a BSN to be licensed, I don't see any change.
Okay, Roxy, for some reason, I think you went to mute accidentally.
Yes,
But I think it's time to Q&A.
Yeah, we're going to start on our Q&A. Thanks, guys. So some of these questions in the Q&A have been addressed. If you need to reach out to us individually or after to get more clarification, let us know. So some of the questions were related to priority dates being current for F1 students. And again, we just want to mention you should be reading the dates for filing for when we can file your I-485 and your I-765 for your new work permit. We talked a little bit about Mike's predictions, which are, of course, that there is no prediction that is absolute. Let's see, another question had, my OPT ends in November and my priority date is in 2023. Will I be able to file my I-485 and get a new EAD? Mike?
So priority date is November 2023.
July 2023.
Oh, I'm sorry, July 2023, and the OPT expires in November. So the date that they care about is the date for filing chart, which is in February. And so the question is the October bulletin going to have a date beyond July? And I'm going to say I would bet it is. I could be wrong, but I'm going to bet it is. Now, I still think that you should probably plan on going back to school and doing a first day CPT, because even if you're eligible to file in October, you're not going to likely have a new EAD in November. They're not going to be that fast. So you need something. And in the event that they're not, the party dates don't move that far. But I would be optimistic for you. Not a guarantee, of course, but that's only a 4-month move. I could see it easily moving 4 months.
Okay, great. Let's see, Ricardo's asking, is there any truth that the limit will be a little more than 140,000 for those visas you mentioned that are issued per year, as the consulate is still processing too slow?
Well, the answer is yes, but it has nothing to do with the consulate. So it's a complicated formula that they use based upon a certain percentage of the number of immigrants that are issued. So what we know for a fact is the carryover, the spillover I talked about will not happen, okay? But the number is always higher than 140,000 because of the way it's calculated. So for example, this year, the number was 161,000. And they published that usually in October or November, we get a report that says how many actual numbers we get. So, yes.
Ricardo also asks about their friend in the US, and this is about the child age out, the filing date or file action date. Is that what you calculate that child age out
Well,
to?
once the 485 is filed, it locks the date in. So if you're in the US, the rules are a little different. So you file the 485, that's how old your kid is. So your
Great.
kid never ages after that.
Okay, so that it's a little different for those who are living and within the US.
Correct, exactly.
Let's see. Does VIMA help with the visa screen process? Mike, can you touch on that? Mike?
Yeah, of course we do. Our goal is to help you get to the finish line. Visa screen is, it's pretty dependent on your effort, though, because you have to go in and sign up yourself, and you have to take the English language exam. You have to provide your transcripts. We'll support you however we can, but again, the visa screen is a really personal thing that you have to take a lot of responsibility for. But we can talk to you about timing and when to take the language exams and those kinds of things. The costs associated with the visa screen process does get reimbursed to you after you've been working for us for 6 months. So the cost for your English language exam, the cost for the visa screen, cost to send your transcripts. We'll even pay for the fees that you paid to get that original U.S. licensure.
Great. Okay, let's talk a little bit about associate's degrees. Mike Hammond, you had mentioned it with respect to how they look at H-1Bs, but we also have a lot of students who are either an ADN or a BSN. And the question is, for people that have an associate's degree in nursing, is there anyone day one CPT for us? Are there schools for when our OPT ends? And Mike Conley, I'll also ask that you answer that as it relates to ability to work.
Sure. Unfortunately, unless you have a bachelor's degree, you're not going to be able to get into a master's program. The master's programs are the ones that are going to be eligible for the day one CPT. What happens if you have an ADN? You can go into an ADN to BSN program, but you're not going to be eligible to work for 6 months until after you start that program. And then after that 6-month period of time, you are eligible to CPT, but it's not full-time. It's part-time CPT. So it becomes a bit of a struggle for associate's degree nurses because you're going to have to stop working for 6 months while you after you enter the bachelor's program.
Thank you. Let's see, and just switching gears. A couple of people have asked regarding to having an F1 status and an I-140 filed, but potentially leaving the country. So any concerns for US trained nurses exiting the US as opposed to school. Does this change anything with the I-485 processing or the process in general? Mike Hammond?
Yeah, so if you still have a valid visa stamp in your passport, that still has time left, and you have an I-140 filed, but not a 485, and your priority date is current, you can generally travel in and out. If, however, you do not have a valid visa stamp and you would need to get a new visa stamp, which is the most common scenario, you would not be eligible for a new visa stamp, so you would not be able to travel. So the general rule is that most individuals on F1, once they file the I-140, are stuck here until they file that 485 and can get something called advanced parole. So travel can be problematic. Now, you may, if you have that gap, instead of going back to school, decide that you are going to travel and wait and kind of convert your case from a US-based case to a consular processing case. And then you'd want to talk to your account manager about whether that's an option for you. But you can certainly leave. You just may not be able to come back until after you already have the green card issued.
Great. Let's see. Brian writes, my priority date is May 2023, and they were DQ'd on December 25th, 2022. What are the chances that my priority date will be current this coming fiscal year in 2025? And he asked which month. Of course, that would be, we're not sure. What would also be my expected embassy interview date? Can you address the DQ dates along with priority dates?
Yeah, before you could be scheduled for an interview, not only does your priority date have to be current, but you have to be DQ'd, right? Different consulates take people in different orders. There are a lot of consulates that are self-serve. You schedule your appointment by going online and picking the first available date. And you're only eligible to do that if your priority date's current and you're already DQ'd. Other consulates who don't have self-service operations take you in order of priority date oldest and then DQ. So the DQ date is important. But the bottom line, for a May 2023, I think it's possible. That's a 7-month jump for next year. I'm going to be optimistic and say, yeah, I think we'll get 7 months. The exact date it's going to happen, I'm going to say June 3rd. That's what I'm going to say. But now I have no idea. But you're on the cusp of whether 2025 is going to happen or not. One of the things to keep in mind is almost all of the visa numbers are used up in the first 3 quarters of the year. So we've got October, November, December, January, February, March, April, May, June. That's when almost all of them are used. So if you're not current by then, you're not likely going to be current. Matter of fact, in the summer, we call it summer retrogression. You're likely going to go backwards. Or we might even have a situation, for example, a lot of us are expecting that in September, the visa bulletin, instead of saying a date, it's going to have a U, a letter U, which stands for unavailable. Means they've all been used, which may freak you out. And you may think retrogression is getting worse, when in reality, that's a good thing. That just means that the system efficiently used up all of the numbers. So for example, last year, we had an allotment of 197,000 visas, and they actually issued 192,300. So we were really close. We used up almost every single one we could use. Whereas 3 years ago, we had 262,000 available, and they only used 195,000. So we wasted 70,000 green cards. So summer retrogression is not a bad thing, but if you're looking for it, it would not happen, I don't think, next summer. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen late spring would be my guess.
Let's see here. For any other questions, I'll just say that we're getting a lot of questions about the H-1B still. At this juncture, do go ahead and email me or the careers at email if you have further questions related to it, and we'll try to get those answered. Additionally, the same for anything related to CPT, ADNs, etc. I do have a question here about another type of visa, Mike Hammond, the EB2 visa, and whether or not that would be an option. Earlier today, we also had a question about an E3.
Okay, so EB2 is limited to those positions where a master's, in this case an MSN, is the criteria for that position. So almost anybody that qualifies for an EB2 is going to also qualify for an H1. So the most common position that we see qualifies for EB2 in the nursing space are nurse educators, whether they're in a hospital or in a school setting. We often will see someone who's involved in nurse informatics that will qualify for the EB2 category. I think NPs, for the most part, are going to be EB2 qualifies, but an RN is not. The E3 visa is a specific visa from Australia, so you need to be an Australian national. The standards are just like an H1. The only difference is you don't go through the USCIS for approval. The approval is done at the consulate. And so the approval rates are higher than they would be in the US, but you still have to meet the criteria of needs a BSN.
Okay, thank you. Sarah, you and I email about this occasionally. The P3AU document that we're receiving from the NVC advising to hold the fee bill. What does that mean for these nurses?
Essentially, we cannot pay your fee bill yet because the NVC is waiting closer until your part date is, around before they will allow us to pay your fee bill. That way, you won't have to constantly log into your account to keep it active, which is better because for some nurses, if you let your account go inactive over a year, they might cancel your case. And then we'll have to refile your I-140, get a new case number. But with this on hold notice, it's the NVC recognizing that, they have your case. They're just waiting for your priority date to become, closer to when they can actually start taking in your documents and scheduling an interview.
So this is not cause for concern per se. It's somewhat of a relief in a way to know that they've received you're just waiting for the next step because of the backup. Yeah.
This notice is something that we started seeing this year. It's a new type of, notice that they've sent out because of retrogression.
Thank you. Okay. What does it matter if my visa expires this year, but my I-20 is current during OPT? Can you still accommodate me in a hospital and get me my green card?
Absolutely. The expiration of your visa in your passport is irrelevant. As long as you're maintaining F1 status with an I-20 or an OPT, you are perfectly fine. Your visa does not provide status.
At this juncture, I wanted to also just mention again, more questions about CPT and OPT. Another great resource is, of course, to always reach out to some of the schools that you're looking at and ask their folks at those locations about their requirements for CPT and whether or not certain, I had a question, for instance, on, I think it was an NP MSN and whether or not that's a STEM. These types of questions will also be better suited by the folks at those schools because each school can be different with what they require or allow. Okay. And let's see, how long do people take to start working after passing the NCLEX? Just worried about delayed priority date. Mike Conley?
Well, yeah, that's a tough one. I think legally, you're supposed to start working within 60 days of the start date of your OPT. Sometimes that's doable, and oftentimes it's not. And we're in a really, really, really difficult environment right now for new grads. Post-pandemic, the whole world of nursing has changed dramatically. Travel nursing has dried up, as all the nurses that went to make all their fortune in travel nursing are now working back at their original hospitals where they worked. The hospitals themselves have suffered financially dramatically during pandemic. And so as they're coming out of pandemic, they're looking at, ways to save money. And ways to save money is not hiring nurses, not bringing in travelers, being very, very selective. I know that new grads are having a really hard time just about everywhere this year. And we've got a couple clients who've been using them, and they're tightening their belts. And we keep pitching it to other hospitals, but I'm telling you right now, new grad's tough, because any hospital can go out and find as many new grads as they want right now, just from their local schools. So our advice for anybody who's just got their OPT and is waiting for a company like ours to be able to bring them on and start the sponsorship program is take a job in nursing, however you can find it, while you wait out one of our clients to open up in an acute care setting. If that means going to work at in a SNF or a skilled nursing, long-term care, something where you can start using your license, getting some experience, making yourself marketable. But keep in mind, OPT is going to run out no matter what. Even if we filed a case for you the first day your OPT started, your OPT was going to run out before an I-485 could be filed. So you will eventually be required to go into a CPT program if your goal is to continue working while waiting for the immigration process to continue. So we're just asking people that we're working with to, take care of themselves while we try and work through this glut with our clients. And then when the jobs are open, we'll let you know, and you can transfer into that acute care setting that you're looking for.
Okay, let's see. This is a good question about English exams. In particular, the question always comes up about IELTS versus PTE, and we'll touch base on that. However, I have a nurse here saying they've been working as a nurse for 15 years and took IELTS in 2011. Would you know if I have to retake IELTS to be able to get a visa screen? The quick answer is IELTS do expire, I think, if it's 2 years, if I'm correct, Mike. And therefore you would need to retake an English exam, correct? Yes.
Yeah,
So,
there's no way it's still valid from 2011.
and to make another point with what you touched base on, Mike Hammond, which is the time considerations. Keep in mind that, if you take your English exam and it expires before you get your visa screen, you will need to retake that English exam. Mike Conley, often IELTS and PTE come up. Can you comment on those two English exams, how they relate to our placements?
Really, the way it relates is they're both eligible under the visa screen at this point in time. The only time we're a little concerned about PTE is if someone's coming into California who wasn't educated originally in English, because California can require passing scores on an IELTS or TOEFL. They haven't said that they would accept PTE. So, and getting anything out of the California Board of Nursing is like pulling teeth. But at this point in time, if you were not educated in English, and most of our Philippine nurses that we work with, They're educated in English, so it's not a problem. They can take PTE and not worry about it. But if you're from somewhere there where your language was not English, where you got your bachelor's degree in nursing, we would recommend, if you want to work in California, to take IELTS. If California doesn't matter, then you can take PTE.
Great, thank you, very helpful. Also, I see a comment about a previous employer having a priority date for you. If you have, it says here you just signed with VEMA, do let us know. Sarah, of course, is your paralegal case manager. Certainly email her and Mike Hammond with what that priority date is. We would want to recapture that if it's eligible. That will help you. I see here it's from 2020, so that would be great. Okay, we're gonna take a couple more questions and then let these folks go. But in the meantime, again, I'll mention email. My email is in the invite from this webinar. It's rmoser@vmstaffing.com. And you can also email us at careers@vmstaffing.com. If your question did not get answered, some will be able to answer. Others, you might want to consult, some of these CPT programs. Again, everything is different depending on the program you go to, but we'll do our best to get you the information that you would like, or at least the resources to where you can find it. Okay. We have my I-140 is filed and I'm waiting for my green card and the contract with VEMA ends. Will I need to extend my contract? We'll handle that one offline. Narathip, nice to see you in this webinar. You guys have sent in so many great questions. There's just too many to answer at this time.
I've actually been trying to type answers to a few of them and while we've been going along.
Oh, okay.
Just to
Awesome.
help.
Okay, here's a good one on premium. Let's touch base since we talked about that way in the beginning. If I opt to pay for premium processing, will I have to pay the difference between $1,500 and $480 I paid originally? I'm not quite sure I understand, Ian, but the premium processing is really what I want to touch base here. Again, Mike Hammond, can you comment again why premium is not necessarily a benefit?
Yeah. So first of all, the premium fee is a filing fee paid to the U.S. government, and it's $2,805. So I don't know where the 15 or the 480 came from, but it's $2,805 is the filing fee today. That filing fee could change in the future, but right now that's the amount. Unless you have a priority date that is already current, there is no advantage to you filing under premium, because it is not going to give you an earlier priority date. It's also not going to make your time spent in the line any shorter. With that said, there's no harm in doing it. It's simply a waste of your money. I will, if you talk to me individually, I will do my very best to talk you out of it and to convince you to do something much smarter with $2,805 of extra money, such as going to your local casino, putting it down on Black 13 and letting it ride, because your odds are better, that it'll be more advantageous to you. But again, it doesn't hurt your case, just no value.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Before we let you go, I wanted to ask each of our panelists just one last question, which is, what word of encouragement or advice would you give each of these nurses as they embark on their journey? We'll go backwards this time and start with Sarah.
Oh God. I guess the only words of encouragement that I have is make sure that you're up to date on all of your documents. If you're getting married or having children, definitely contact us. Make sure we have their documents so we can add them as soon as we get their fee bill. And just, keep checking the visa bulletin, keep checking in with us. We're always happy to answer your questions, or at least I am. I'll respond as quickly as possible. But yeah, just be hopeful, keep looking at the visa bulletin. You'll get here. Might take a minute, but you will get here.
Great, thanks, Sarah. Mike Hammond.
Yeah, I would say probably the thing I would encourage you is to not worry so much about what the Visa Bulletin does month to month. And get overly concerned about, like, for example, what it does during the summer, or too concerned about what it did 3 years ago. And just focus on your end goal. It's a little like, when you start college and you've got a 4-year program, we just know that at the end of that 4 years, I'm going to have my degree. I'm going to have what I want to do, and that's going to meet my goal. And this, think of it as just, another school. If I stay the course, do the things I can do, I'm going to come out at the end. I'm going to be fine. And the reality is, the U.S. nursing shortage is not going away. And so it's not a situation where you're going to be able to, I might lose my chance. I do not believe that's the case whatsoever. So stay the course.
Thank you, Mike, and thanks for all your wisdom today. You're super helpful. Michael Conley, what do you say,
Yeah,
sir?
I'm gonna follow up on what Michael says. When we started working in this business in 1840, there was a period of time where retrogression was years. I literally had one nurse. It took her 12 years to get through that process. So when I see 3 years as like worst case, that gives me hope. I think that that's not so bad. What you need to do is 2 things. Be patient, because it's a process. It just takes time. You have to trust the process. You're going to get through it. Everybody tries to game it. That's why we hear so many questions about the H-1B. Everybody wants to game the system. Oftentimes it's just easier to, take care of yourself, get as much bedside experience as you can, take care of your families. Michael touched on it earlier. If you have an opportunity to go work abroad, do it. You'll make more money. You'll get that experience of living and working in a different culture, which will make your transition to the United States even easier. And I can tell you that our clients love nurses that have already worked somewhere else in the world. So I think that you've been given a curse and a blessing, and it's called time. It's going to take a lot of time to get here, but you also have a blessing of using that time to better yourself and to take care of everything you need to take care of before you make that big move. So keep your chins up.
Great words to end today's webinar. Thank you, everyone who's come to attend. We really appreciate it. This will be posted on social media for you to review again and or share with anyone. Thank you to the panelists. We really appreciate your time today, and everyone have a good afternoon or good morning or good night.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Roxy.
Roxy.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye, all.